are getting it. Interesting story is the fact that the texting ban while driving bill failed in 2008. However, that following summer, the Youth and Government group, which is students, high school students from all over the state, got together, and they actually passed that bill before the legislature did in the following year. And they understood the dangers. In fact, I think they passed 3 bills in their mock legislature, and one of them was the texting ban. And these buttons we're wearing today, in fact, are Don't Do It, D-U-I-T, driving under the influence of texting. That comes from a student group in Londonderry, New Hampshire, who adopted the texting and distracted driving problem as a cause. And they actually have a pledge, Don't Do It pledge, and they have students and other people pledge that they won't drive while they're texting. They promise to assign a designated texter to handle all the text messages in the car. So I think the young people get it because it is such an ingrained part of their behavior.
Right. Now, you must talk to a lot of people from a wide variety of ages. Whenever you're thinking about, a bill on the floor or sponsoring a bill like you did with this texting ban, which will go into effect on January 1st. And if I understand, there's going to be a $100 fine.
You treat it like a violation if somebody's found to be doing it and convicted.
Right. And what were some of the messages you were getting from the public as you were thinking about this issue and thinking about sponsoring it? Not just from, the teenagers themselves, which obviously were very involved in getting the ball rolling. Did you hear from parents or grandparents or other people out there?
Absolutely. Heard from parents, heard from a lot of teenagers that actually came, took time off from school to testify. Interestingly, the wireless phone companies didn't oppose the bill. In fact, one of them, AT&T, supported it. So it goes all the way from the corporations down to moms and dads, and it's common sense, you would think, but still the bill took 2 sessions to pass, and I think only 19 states have texting bans out of the 50. Although it's a growing phenomenon in the sense that I think New Hampshire would have been the second had they passed it in 2008. They were the 19th, and they did it in 2009. So it definitely is growing.
I think the Driver Distraction Summit that Secretary LaHood hosted in D.C. Earlier this year, the topic of texting and driving was described as the culmination of cognitive, visual, and manipulative distraction in really a snowball effect in the worst possible way. Seeing that texting and driving really becomes one of the first things that everybody can see as a real problem. There is no argument of safety involved. It's not safe. It's clearly something that pulls our attention away from the road for a period of time that is far and above beyond what is safe at 60 miles an hour, at 30 miles an hour, or even slower.
Now, Brian, what research have you done that supports some of these notions that you're bringing forth to the table tonight? I understand you work with Age Lab at MIT, but what are some of the experiments or some of the things that you guys have done to help create or facilitate experiments in other places, which kind of proves what you're talking about? So
my background, I'm a researcher in the Age Lab at MIT. I'm also the Associate Director of the New England University Transportation Center, which is a large DOT grant for developing new research, educational, and technology transfer objectives. Some of the work I direct looks at how people manage the demands associated with secondary interactions in the car. So whether that's cell phone calls, or cognitive distractions, or manipulative interactions with devices, be that navigation devices or others. How are we capable of managing these demands? We naturally have a safety mechanism built in. We rarely look, or at least traditionally, rarely looked away from the road for more than 1.6 seconds. And then naturally something back here said, wait, I gotta look, I need some information. And our attention focused back towards the road. And we began to share information between off-axis or non-primary tasks, so distractions, and the road, and sharing information back and forth. New technology, text messaging, more advanced displays in the car, have pulled our attention fairly hard. I mean, you know, the phone rings, we feel compelled to answer it away from the primary driving task for a longer period of time. So in essence, we see a higher incidence of glances away from the road that we never saw traditionally.
Right, and you said traditionally we looked away from our task of driving for 1.6 seconds. And from what I understand from the studies that I've read, when a person text messages, they're taking their eye off the road for 5 seconds.
5 seconds is a long time, but yeah, some of the glances are up there. So in 1.6 seconds, we're capable of managing demands. And you see some of the literature trying to push things up a little higher, and you see a lot of 2 seconds now becoming popular. But some of the most basic work done in the 70s and 80s traditionally said about 1.6 seconds before all this really neat technology and the nomadic devices began appearing. 1.6 seconds, I looked at the radio, I changed the radio station, and I looked back up. In some of the instrumented vehicle studies and some of the simulation studies that I'm involved with, well, you see that pans out very well. Naturally, in the back of our minds, we feel a little uncomfortable. But the compelled nature in the pull of the social interaction that we see today, especially among teens, but not alone, pulls our attention towards the device. Well, this is important. Well, no, it isn't. We're driving our car. What's really important is I focus on the road in front of me and I get where I want to go safely.
The Virginia Tech study famously talked about the fact they installed cameras, I think, for 1 year in a bunch of professional truck drivers' cabs, and found out they're 23 times more likely to have an accident when they're texting. And the reason I think it probably resonated so is because they're professional drivers. They aren't teenagers. They aren't occasional drivers. They're professionals, and they're still 23 times more likely.
Right, and the study that you're referring to, David, just for our viewers at home, is the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute did a study over 18 months with long-haul truck drivers with video cameras in the cab, and they were 23 times more likely to have a collision. Overall cost of that study was $6 million to equip the trucks, and they tracked them for 3 million miles. So it wasn't something that they were going just back and forth and back and forth. They hauled furniture and frozen foods and other goods across the country. And like you said, David, these are professionals on the road, so we would automatically assume that they're paying more attention or they're a better driver because they do it every day. And it just goes to show that, you know, a lot of this stuff, it doesn't matter what age you are, whether you're a teenager or not, that it's really bad to be doing a lot of these things. I know that in December of 2008, phone users in the United States sent out 110 billion messages, which is a tenfold increase in just 3 years. So I think that the more popular some of these things become, the more important it is that we do have some legislation to protect ourselves in our own vehicles, because there are so many other people on the road and we are traveling those very high speeds. Now, what other studies did New Hampshire look at or use when they were deciding on this legislation? Was there any of this information available, or?
The Virginia Tech study came out after we passed the bill, but there were other studies that were definitely already in. You go online and put distracted driving or texting, you get a number of studies that came up that showed it's unsafe behavior.
I mean, when you think of it as unsafe behavior, excuse me, 5 seconds looking away, 60 miles an hour, that's 450 feet that you're traveling, the length of 1.5 football fields on narrow roads where you've got 1.5 feet, 2 feet maybe for the shoulder before the ditch or the tree or the stone wall, or a foot or so before you cross that yellow line and hit into that other vehicle or sideswipe them. And yet we give ourselves permission. When I say we, of course, I'm referring to those who do that. But it's so many people. I mean, it's just so common. And that's concerning.
One of the people that testified before the committees made a very good demonstration, because about 4 seconds to go 100 yards. So he asked everybody in the room to close their eyes for 4 seconds, and think how long that is that you have no vision and you're driving.
Yeah,
it's a long.